the idea to do this several years ago because I wanted to get the two of you together to talk about how you met and why you decided to become friends. Dianne, I'm going to throw that to you first.
Well, the first thing is that we have to talk about Anita Crown and the panel of American women, because that is how we met.
That's
and
right.
I remember the first time I met your mother. I had just done a panel. I think Maria must have been an infant, and your mother came up to the stage and she was glowing. She was absolutely beautiful, and she had such a welcoming smile. And we had discussed on the panel things that were controversial because it was in the 60s and we were trying to get people of different races and religions to talk to each other. And so it had been a controversial group, but when your mother came up, there was nothing controversial about that. She was just wonderful. And I remember that. She was beautiful. That's what I remember.
This would have been probably, if Maria was an infant, then I was probably an infant. This would have been about 1966, probably.
Yes.
No, it was 1963 or 4.
I was not born, nor was Maria.
No, it wasn't. Because Jonathan was born
This is typical. This is going to happen throughout the discussion.
Jonathan was born in 63.
Okay.
And I know it was after that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I don't have a diary, but I know he was born in 63. And after he was born, I went back to teaching for just about 6 months. And then the Miami diocese, hired me to work with young people, which I did until I got pregnant with Maria. And it was after that I met, through the diocese again, Anita, who was Anita Crown at the time. And I worked with her for a while before I met you, Brenda.
Yes.
So I think it had to be around 67.
And Dianne, you're African-American Catholic from New Orleans?
Yes, that is right.
What year did you move to Miami?
In 62. Straight out of college and marriage. We had just I graduated from college, we got married, and we fled to Miami.
Why do you say fled?
Because I felt New Orleans was stifling. It was very racist, and I did not want to be there. Miami, although it was in Florida, was different. You could listen to the minimum things that we expected. You could go to restaurants. You could go to the theater. You could do some things in Miami that you couldn't do in New Orleans. And both my husband and I had jobs already. And the teachers, the teachers union was integrated. It was not in New Orleans. Nothing was integrated in New Orleans.
Mom, you had arrived in Miami in 1959. Did they still, Grandma Lee used to talk about when she got there in whatever it was, 26
1932 or 31.
1931, yeah. The signs that said no colored, no Jews, no dogs. Was that still the case when you got there?
Absolutely, when I moved to Miami. But I will remind Dianne and you that Javier went to Tulane and left Tulane after 1 year because New Orleans was so racist. He couldn't stand New Orleans. He hated it.
So,
And though he hated cold weather, he left and went to Michigan.
but wasn't Miami, I mean, you were a Jewish, conservative Jewish woman from
It was
Portland, Maine.
segregated.
Yeah, it was segregated. That's your recollection.
Absolutely. When I went to Sears with Dad to do an apartment setup kind of shopping, there were separate bathrooms and water fountains that had colored only on them.
Dianne, what was that like for you?
I had low expectations. So there were things, I believe that teachers were paid the same in Miami, black and white teachers. They were not paid the same in New Orleans. There were so many differences, and I didn't expect to integrate a neighborhood at that time. I did subsequently, but at that time, I knew I had to live in a black neighborhood. That was not shocking to me. So my expectations were, as I said, minimal, but they were better than New Orleans.
When I met you, you were in Allapattah.
Yes, that is
Right.
true.
That was
And
a neighborhood, Allapattah?
Yes, it was changing. It had been a white neighborhood. By that time, almost all white people had moved out. It was a lovely little subdivision off Northwest 12th Avenue. Our house, the house that we bought, was about 40 years old. So when we went in, we redid the whole thing. I mean, we put in a new kitchen, we did bathrooms, we did everything. And I was expecting Jonathan. We moved in December of 1962. There was one old lady from the Keys who was Caucasian, who lived across the street and at the corner. And we became friends, and she would come and babysit. When I went and did panel of American women, she would babysit for Jonathan. And she was quite elderly at the time. I don't know how I did that, but I was young and didn't know any better. But at any rate, she was the only white person that still lived in the neighborhood.
Mom, I'm curious. So first, tell me about your first memory of meeting Dianne, and then I want both of you to tell me about why you went to the panel of American women. What drew you there?
Oh, well, I went to the panel of American women, though Anita Crown was reluctant to have me because I chaired the education committee for the American Jewish Committee Miami chapter. And we started the panel of American women.
AJC did?
Yes, in Miami. It also started it in Kansas City with Esther Brown, but we started it in Miami. And as chair of the education committee, I had some responsibility for getting it together. And then Anita was assigned the panel. And Anita was happily assigned to the panel and did a terrific job of organizing it. But she didn't much like me. And so it took a while when Ellie Lipton, who was the director of the American Jewish Committee at the time and later became your father's secretary, who did like me, said she thought it was time that I joined the panel. And I met Dianne at the panel.
Was Anita white or black?
White.
And
She
what do
was
you?
a member of the
Anita
American
was
Jewish
Jewish.
Committee.
Yes.
Yeah, wake up and smell the coffee, Adam.
Well-
She was white.
And did
She was very much from the Crown family of Chicago. She had married into the Crown family and she wore the crown and then she got divorced.
Are you talking about Crown Liquors?
Yes, I'm talking about the Crown Hotel people.
Oh.
And then she came to Miami as a newly single woman, but she never gave up the name Crown. And then she married in Miami. So she was not Anita. She was Anita Crown when Dianne met her. She was Anita Boaz later on.
And do you remember the first time or your earliest memory of Dianne?
Well, I thought it was earlier than Dianne is now correcting me to tell me that it was. Because I remember very graphically when, well, I say very graphically, but I'm not sure which one it was. It was either John Kennedy or it was Martin Luther King. Both of them killed in 1963, right?
No, King was 68.
No.
Oh, okay. King was 68. Then she's right. Because when I met Dianne, it was very important to me because you don't remember this. She'll remember it because I think I told her. Jonathan, your older brother, was very concerned that he might be Black. He might turn into being Black. We lived in Miami, in South Miami, near Lee Park, which was a Black neighborhood, and we lived 2 blocks from it. And Jonathan, at 3 or 4, had concluded that it was not good to be Black.
This was the area that had that wall. I remember as a kid, that neighborhood.
Yes.
And there was a wall around that neighborhood.
There was a wall around our neighborhood. There wasn't a wall around the Lee Park, the Black neighborhood. And I was concerned about that. He wouldn't take his shirt off at the beach because he was concerned he'd get too tanned. So it was a real issue for me. And I had heard Dianne and I had met Dianne, and John and Jonathan are about 10 months apart. They're around the same age.
What year was Jonathan born?
63.
Jonathan and Jonathan are the same age.
No, they're
Jonathan, Maria, me, then Jennifer, then Stephen.
But I thought your mother's children were a wee bit older than mine.
Yeah.
Possibly.
I think so. At any rate, I knew that it was important. First of all, I liked her, but I knew it was important that our children play with one another, grow up knowing each other. And it was when Martin Luther King died, Dianne.
Yeah, well, see, that was subsequent to when I first met you.
Yes, it was.
You were not on the panel.
No. And
you came up and we met that first time.
That's correct. But we didn't have much opportunity to follow up.
No.
But in 1968, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, I felt a very strong need to reach out to Dianne. And correct me, Dianne, I believe he was assassinated on a Friday.
I believe so. But
and I needed to go to temple that night. I needed the comfort of a religious service. And Joe Narrett was our rabbi.
I remember.
And I called Dianne because I needed not just comfort, but for me, but I thought she would need comfort. And I knew she'd be going to church on Sunday. In my naivete, it never occurred to me she could go to church at any time she wanted. And I called her And I asked her if she and John would join Dad and me at services that Friday night. And she said, yes, they would. And so we went to services together. And that was very comforting to me. And I made a decision because in 1968 or in 1963 or whenever Black people and white people came together, it was intentional. It wasn't because they lived down the street. It wasn't because you belonged to the same organizations. You had
the same church.
What?
Or the same church.
That's right. You had to make a decision.
Yeah.
That you wanted to have a friend of a different color, or you weren't going to have one. And I very intentionally made that decision. There were other African American women on the panel, and I was fond of them, and I'm still fond of Thelma Gibson, and Jessie Price was a treasure. But I intentionally wanted to be Diane's friend. And that experience of sharing that service was a very important decision for me and a very important step for me.
Diane, do you remember going to the synagogue that night? And is that also, was it your intention? Was the friendship intentional?
The friendship was intentional, and I have told people subsequently that you have to make an effort to develop friendships with people of other cultures. Even today, it just doesn't happen. Even when people work together, they don't socialize. If you don't socialize, you really have no way of truly knowing those people. But we had a more intense relationship than that, because I have to say that Anita, who became Anita Boaz, was very, I don't know what her background or training was, but we trained to be on the panel because we had lots of angry feelings, and we had to get over many things about other people before she would even let us be on the panel.
I want to ask you about those feelings, but what did the panel of American women do? What was its purpose?
Oh,
go ahead.
What did we think we do?
What did we think
we do? Yeah. Those are not the same thing.
Okay.
We thought we educated the community, and what we really did was educate each other.
Yeah, we did. We educated ourselves as well as each other. And I am closer to your mother than I am to most other people on the panel, even if they were Black. And I think part of it was that we were young marrieds with young children.
Right.
And we wanted our children to have a more open relationship. And we did. We went to the beach and we did things with them. So if they don't do right now, it's not our fault.
Because God knows we tried.
I remember riding in the back of the white Barracuda.
Oh, yes, you remember that.
to what I used to call Naked Lady Park, was not Matheson Hammock, but the park with the...
No, it was in South Miami. It was
and Maria
South
Smith. I tell the story to my friends today that my first friend in this world was Maria Smith. But Diane, you talked about being angry and having to train not to be angry. Tell me about this and what Anita required of you.
I don't even know where to start. You know, you asked me part of why, I couldn't, like we went to the park in Miami, I couldn't go to City Park in New Orleans. I literally could not go to City Park. I could not go to the library. I could not go to a whole bunch of things. Everything was what I couldn't do. So yes, I was angry. I suspect I'm still angry, but I learned to channel it somewhat.
I like the somewhat.
When you talk about our joining you to go to the temple on that night, I would describe myself as being a devout Catholic at that time. I no longer am that, but I was. And so was my husband. And he left early in the morning to go to 6 o'clock Mass when Martin Luther King was assassinated the next morning. And he overheard a group of people. This was a church that was predominantly white, but we were involved with people at that church. And he overheard some people, including a priest, saying that he got what he deserved. It was overdue. This is when my otherwise devout husband was trying to go to Mass, overhearing people from that congregation who we thought were our friends, you know. I think that was the deterioration, perhaps, of many things, but that's the kind of anger that you don't quite get beyond. So when we went to the temple with Brenda and Bob, that was a relief in a way, because there was another group of people that were mourning his death, as we all should have been doing, and not celebrating it. So, you know, being Black in this country, Adam, is quite something. It's a challenge.
You've shared that with me on occasion. Yeah,
I?
Well, it's when you and Jennifer were here about 2 years ago, and
Yes.
we're way ahead. But
Oh,
you told me the
yes,
story.
yes.
I think you were at the theater or at the opera, and
Yes.
a woman came up to you, and I mean, if you want to tell the story now, you can.
Oh, yeah, it didn't happen in New York. It happened in New Orleans. I was there for the Christmas play, and some of my little grand nieces and nephews were going to be in it. They were the only Black children in it. I was waiting for my son in the lobby, and I'm going to say I was dressed to the nines, very well coiffed, everything perfect, right? And this woman passed all these different people and came up to me and asked me if I worked there. My blood pressure must have gone up 200 points. And I was rude. I said, you know, I looked at her and I said, do I look like I work here? And it lasted the whole evening. I was furious. And then she tried to say, well, I didn't know. Don't even go there because you're making it worse. So I went to sit down, find my seat. And I said it out so that everybody in the area could hear. I used to be meek and humble. I'm not that anymore. And I told the whole story because I wanted the white people around to hear that you can't do that. You cannot do that. Anyhow, Nicholas, I have to tell the rest of it. Nicholas is my little grandson. And he had asked me, he said, Gammy, my little cousins who are going to be in the play have never ridden in a limousine. Can we get a limousine after the program, the play? And I said, well, if I do, that's going to be your Christmas present. He said, yes, that's all right. So I had ordered a limo to pick us up after the play. And they didn't just bring a limo, they didn't check with me, but it was like a party bus. So this thing drives up, and all these people are coming out, and everybody's impressed because who are they waiting for? They're waiting for this little group of Black children. And I was so glad I had gotten it, because these kinds of things that ordinarily don't mean a bit to me meant something to me that night because of what had happened, you know? So at any rate, that's that story.
I want to go back.
Yes.
But let's go back to 68. So
Yes.
after the service at the temple and after Martin Luther King was assassinated, my recollection is, spending the first early parts of my childhood with Maria and with Jonathan and Stephen and Jennifer. We would spend Christmas Eve with you, and you would spend Passover with us.
And we loved Passover. The Christmas Eve thing, I hadn't been doing that. I did it especially because of your family and Linda's family and all my friends on the panel, because I had not had Christmas parties before. But either your mother or Linda told me, they've never decorated a Christmas tree. I said, oh, we can do that. And so we started having Christmas Eve. And initially, you kids all decorated the Christmas tree. And then your mother and dad started inviting us for Passover. My children still love Passover. My children love Passover. And I keep telling people around here about it. There are not many Jews, but anyhow, I haven't been invited to a Passover Seder since. Now, we even got the Haggadah, and we tried to do Passover at our house when we were not where you're in Miami or something. But, it wasn't the same. It just,
You left out something important about Christmas Eve.
What?
You used to make latkes every Christmas Eve.
That's right. I did. I still make latkes. And
because Hanukkah was either just before or during.
That is right. And I learned to make great latkes.
Yes, you did.
And my
Wonderful
grandchildren love latkes. So my
Right.
grandchildren know a lot of things, but superficially,
You have to forgive me. I'm upgrading the Zoom right now so that we don't have to stop the discussion. But that experience you had, Mom,
Yes.
because I vividly remember decorating the Christmas tree. I remember the Passovers. What was it like to watch all of us, the 7 of us children, together?
I don't really think that I thought much about it. And that's the statement I want you to hold on to. It was by that time, Dianne and I were so bonded that it was a very natural thing. So I didn't concentrate on all of you being together. It was just a very natural, wonderful experience for all of us. And I didn't sit there thinking about the fact of it. I just enjoyed it. And it means to me, when you and Jennifer text each other, when you and Jennifer email, it resonates with me, whether I read the emails or not. And I acknowledge
the emails to you.
No, and I acknowledge that the Jonathans think positively about each other, but they were in very different worlds. Jonathan was at Palmetto, our Jonathan was at Gables. They didn't socialize. Maria has always been her own person and gone her own way. And Stephen was the baby. But it really means a lot to me that you and Jennifer have the relationship that you have. I love that. And I love the fact that all of you have positive memories of growing up together. Was that intentional on Diane's part and my part? Yes. Did we have to do a lot of driving to make that happen? Yes. We never lived next door. The closest we ever lived was when Diane and John and the family lived on Southwest 62nd Avenue. And we lived in Twin Lakes. What?
It was 97th Avenue.
97th, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Diane, I'm curious, did your kids ever, ask about us and, what was going on, or did they take it as matter of fact? I think the three of us took it as matter of fact. Hey,
it was matter of fact.
Yeah.
It was matter of fact. It was never strange. It was never different or unusual to them. You were just friends. And we have remained friends with some other families, but not with all the families that we knew over the years. So you're
one of the nights that I have never forgotten, and I have said that Diane's my most important friend because I've learned the most from her, was when you and I had dinner. Diane was single at the time. I was single. And we went out to her townhouse and we had dinner, and you were at Syracuse and you were going to have this career in media. And Diane and the girls, because it was only Jennifer and Maria were there.
I remember this. Yeah.
And you were talking about either Huntley Brinkley or someone
No, it was
on
after that. It was actually, what's his name at ABC? Peter.
Whomever. And they didn't know who you were talking about. And I was shocked that they didn't know. And
Peter
you were
Jennings,
shocked
the anchor at
that they
ABC.
didn't know until Diane said, "Why would we watch television news? It's not about us. There's nothing that's happening that relates to us. And there's no one who looks like us broadcasting." And I remember the look on your face, and I remember my insides. Those are the kinds of experiences that too many people will never have.
I just want to warn you both that if we lose the meeting, I'm going to send you a new link to start the meeting. I upgraded, but I don't know if it's going to take.
Okay.
And I'll email you both the new link if we have to. But Diane, my mom tells a story about something you said to her before that discussion, which would have been in the 1980s, where, and I want you to correct my version of this, but you had to explain to my mom that you wake up every morning and you know you're Black and are reminded of it.
Actually, it was much later than that.
Oh.
Because it was when I had gone to Paris. And I think what I told her was the first time I could wake up and not think about being Black. So it's a little bit different.
Can you tell me that?
It was later.
Tell me that story.
Well, it was when I went to spend a year in Paris with my husband, Ernest Gaines. And my experience was so different. And your mother and I would talk about lots of things in depth. And I told her at one point that it was the first time I could wake up and not think about being Black first.
Right.
I never thought about it. Now, I might have to explain that. You see, the states have a history of racism that I have lived through. I didn't live through it. And France, while it has its own problems, it never had the kind of racism that was part of the law that the United States had. It never had slavery the way they may have had it in other countries. They didn't have it. They didn't have all the different levels of racism that I had lived through and had to learn to navigate. So I felt free for the first time. Yet when Michelle Obama said something about she finally feels is proud of her country or something, everybody jumped on her, but I knew what she meant, because for the most part, we never feel free. We just never do.
If I say to many of my friends, have you ever heard the Black National Anthem? They look at me, they don't know what I'm talking about.
I
I
know.
heard it for the first time.
And I'm hearing it in my head, but they don't know what I'm talking about.
I want to say something that your mother and I didn't just talk about race and issues like that. We talked about children and husbands and food and clothes and
law school.
and the law. We all went back to school. I mean, we talked about it. We had much in common.
Yeah.
It was we transcended the fact that we came from different cultures.
Well, the two of you went through law school, not together, but together. Diane, you became a lawyer.
Diane went first.
The two
Yeah.
of you divorced
Yeah.
and then remarried.
Yes.
So there was a lot that you had in common other than the intentional friendship.
Yeah, but all of that came later. We had already had the intentional friendship that had to do with cooking and baking and raising children.
Right.
And I can remember some of those days. We would go to each other's house and, you know, there would be something on the stove or in the oven.
Right. And our families knew each other because Grammy Sweets knew Diane.
Yeah.
She knew Maria. She loved Maria. And our sisters knew each other. We knew each other's sisters, is what I meant to say.
Yeah,
And
our families adopted each other, kind of.
right. Our families knew about us, and so they knew each other.
I'm going to ask a selfish question here because you brought up my best friend, Maria. What was it like to watch the two of us together, a boy and a girl, white, black? But I mean, I don't think Maria and I saw each other as white or black. Is there a moment where you think we realized we were white and black? And Diane, I remember once Maria calling me to come over for a sleepover, and you would not permit it. I think we were 6.
Why not?
I don't remember, but I'll tell you this. My children could not sleep over at anybody's house. No way, no how. And I didn't know half the things that go on that I know today. But it was my family's rule, and I transmitted it to my children. And I even told some of their little friends when they would ask my children if they could come to sleep over. No, I would tell their parents, we have a rule, they can't sleep over. But your little girl, your little boy can come and sleep over at my house, which they would do. They would come to my house, but my children couldn't sleep over at their house. That was kind of weird, wasn't it?
But what was it like? What was it like? And this is a selfish, self-centered question. What was it like to watch me and Maria together? Do you have any recollection?
You were just, you
were kids.
You were just adorable, pretty, handsome little children that played together and liked each other.
We went to Coco Plum kindergarten together. I remember that.
Yes. You know, you had a lot in common. You'd like to be together. That's all. It was lovely.
You were kids.
It was
Do you
never,
remember, were there ever any ugly experiences, or were the two of you ever angry with one another? Is that something you recall?
nope. I don't remember ever being
I
angry.
don't ever remember being angry with her.
There was a story, and this may be a fiction in my head. Did the two of you used to call apartments to see if they were available for rent?
That was, we worked briefly in a project for the Urban League.
You did. I don't remember doing
Yes, you
it.
did.
Oh, okay.
I would call and inquire about an apartment. I would go to the apartment. And then a few days later, I thought it was you, Dianne, would go for the same apartment. And of course it had been rented. They were told that she was told it had been rented. But if you don't remember ever doing that with the Urban League, then I remember I did it with the Urban League.
I don't remember that. But I know the house that we wanted to buy in the subdivision off Southwest 97th Avenue.
Right.
They did not want, now we had perfect credit and we had the down payment. We had everything, all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed. We knew we had to do that. And they didn't want to sell it to us. And I was telling Linda and Dick got involved, and they ended up, yes, Brickman. Yes. They ended up selling it to us. I subsequently became a realtor. And when I had found another house after that, the one on 82nd Court. And we had put our house on the market. And somebody told me, another realtor on the phone, the only thing wrong with that house is that, it's the people next door to me who were selling their house, and they had listed it with me. So she said, the only thing wrong with that house is that there are Black people who live next door. She was talking to me. I live next door, right? This was on the phone. And to which I said, oh, don't worry. I hear they're moving anyhow. So, I mean, they're just constant things. And then when I wanted to get an apartment across the highway, when my husband and I first separated, when I called, and by this time I was an assistant county attorney, and I called and the apartment was available. When I showed up, it wasn't available. To which I said, I know why you're not renting this apartment to me, and I'm an assistant county attorney, and I'm telling you, I'm going to pursue this matter. By the time I got home, the apartment was ready. So, it's constant, Adam.
Why did you become an attorney, Dianne?
I had always wanted to be an attorney. From the time I remember Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. I had gone to interview one of the attorneys, prominent Black attorney in New Orleans, who was very gracious to me. And I thought if the law could change things like this, that was what I wanted to be. And I wanted to be a lawyer, but of course it took me a little while.
Were you the first African-American assistant DA in Dade County?
No, I was not the first. I might have been the second. But there were a number of other firsts. I was the first Black lawyer on the Florida Bar Board of Governors. They had let the president of the Black Lawyers Association have a seat, but you couldn't vote. And what is this? You can't vote? What good is it? So anyway, I ran for office. I was president of the Black Lawyers Association and president of the Black Women Lawyers Association, and that was not going to stand. I did run. I lost the first time because I ran against an incumbent, which, but I did it anyway. But the second time I did win, and I won after that too. So, okay, that was that.
And we sat around and wrote stuffed envelopes for you.
Panel of American Women, the Women Lawyers Association. I mean, women just came together and helped me campaign.
And understand, this is for the Board of Governors of the Florida Bar Association.
1980. Do you remember what year this was?
It had to be 1990.
As late as 1990.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing, the first meeting I went to, this is a whole, Nelson Mandela had come to Miami, and the City of Miami Board of Commissioners would not honor him, or they walked out, or they did something ugly.
They wouldn't give him the key to the city.
No, it was worse than that. And so a number of Black organizations, including the Black Lawyers Association, the Women Lawyers, and all of us decided that what we needed to do was boycott Miami's tourist industry. And I wanted to make a presentation to the Florida Bar Board of Governors asking them to do the same thing. And I was told by some of the other women on the Board of Governors that this was my first meeting and it just wasn't done. And I said, but I don't follow other people's rules because they don't apply to me. So I did make an impassioned speech about why we needed to boycott the city of Miami. By the time I got back to my office, the city of Miami commissioners were demanding I be fired. They thought I was using county money to do all of this, and I never used county money. I didn't use it when I ran for the Board of Governors. I didn't use it when I volunteered to represent Haitian refugees, and I didn't use it when I went on the Board of Governors. I always used my own money. And Bob Ginsburg and Murray thought it was hilarious. They just laughed. They had no intention of doing what the City of Miami commissioners wanted them to do. And we did have a boycott for a little while. But it was the idea, how are you going to not, and it was because he had Cuba, Fidel Castro, had supported Mandela. So nobody else supported him. He had been in prison for 20-something years. Anyway, that's another one of those times.
I wanted to ask you both, I'm going to start with you, Mom, and then to Dianne. So what we're all going through now, and the poor choice of words, but what you see now happening. What worries you? What gives you hope? And then the same question to you, Dianne, but Mom first.
Well, before that, can I inject something? When Dianne says our relationship was more than just race, one of the really wonderful things about our relationship is that Javier and Ernest had a genuine affection for one another. And so they came with us And that was very special to me.
Yeah.
And I think that I remember those experiences with Ernest and Javier that we both remember, and that just added to our relationship. As for today, I find I'm truly very depressed. And it's affecting me greatly. All parts of it. The racism, the anti-Semitism, the abject, ignorant hatred that's allowed to be expressed rather freely is very depressing to me. There are times when, and I watch the news too much, I confess to that, but I find myself choking up because of the things that are being said and the things that are being done. When I'm confronted with an attorney general and a president who send federal troops to an American city to deal with protesters, I'm horrified and I feel helpless. And my heart goes out to Portland and to Seattle and to every city with a Democratic mayor. I'm very lucky. I don't have a Democratic mayor, or I'd have federal troops in my city. Am I hopeful? I wish I could tell you that I was. The one glimmer of hope that I have had in the last 3 months is after George Floyd's murder, that people younger than you took to the streets. And they did it in every city of any worth in America. And am I proud of my granddaughter, whose response to her mother when she came home from a protest and was asked why she'd gone was because 20 years from now, when my kid asks me, where were you during the revolution of the 20s? If I have to answer, I was home watching Netflix, I'd be ashamed of myself. That makes me very proud. And that's hope to me. The young men and women who are out on our streets now. But we're living through the worst time of our lives. It's never been great. Making America great again is a myth. We have always had deep problems centered around racism and bigotry, elitism, and class difference. That isn't new. My hope is that the 20 to 30-year-olds will grab hold of it and change it.
Dianne?
Yes. Oh, you know, everything your mother says, that's part of our commitment to each other, I think. We do think alike. One of the things that worries me the most is I think we're on the verge of a loss of democracy. I think that sending in federal troops is part of his plan to take over the country with military force. I sound terrible to me to say that, but it frightens me that much that federal troops are going into cities that have not asked for any help and don't need any help and are physically abusing the populace. He is threatening, to me, he is threatening the kind of democracy we have come to believe in. That is foremost in my mind, believe it or not. It started out with George Foreman, but it's definitely different. But he's using that as a platform because he knows there are enough people out there who agree with him that he can do this. And it's something that we all need to be very, very concerned about. I want you to know Annalisa and her mother marched with their school too. And they had signs that said, Black Lives Matter, Black Students Matter. So I'm proud of her, and I'm proud of them marching also.
Annalisa is your granddaughter?
My granddaughter, who's 17 now.
So let's wrap up this phase of these discussions.
Yes.
I'll start with Mom first, and then Dianne. What would your life be like had you not met Dianne? And Dianne, what would your life be like had you not met Brenda?
Oh, my life would have been clearly diminished. He said me first.
Oh, okay.
I would not know the things I know if I'd never met Dianne. I would not be, you're making me cry, but it's true. She is my most important friend. Not just because I've learned the most from her, but because we have been on the same page always, in every way. And at bad times in our lives, and we've each had them, we've been there for one another. And I can't imagine my life without Dianne.
Dianne?
Want me? Again, I have to agree with Brenda, but I learned so much. I learned and I grew because of Brenda and the kind of friendship that we had, that we could share so many things together. And I remember telling Ernest just a couple of years ago that one of the things I miss most about Miami is my friends and the fact that I always learned from people. I don't seem to have those here. And I'm embarrassed to say it on something that is going to be disseminated. But I really learned from people when I was in Miami, especially my dearest friend Brenda. And others. I mean, we had a fantastic, wonderful group of women. All of us. I loved it, and I miss all of you.